Hi, welcome back to Frank's Final Review. This week we're going to review a bootleg recording from the Jimi Hendrix Experience from their April 25th, 1970 tour opening performance at the LA Forum. In this review, this discussion will sort of conclude the Jimi Hendrix Experience series, sort of an unofficial series, if you will. Shows that Jimmy played in Los Angeles County, the two Hollywood Bowl shows from 1967 and 1968, and obviously the most recent release, the August 18th, 1967 show, really kind of kicked this Jimmy Plays LA series, if you will. And that was kind of an exciting release. And so, wanting to continue on with the 14th September 1968 Hollywood Bowl show, Jimmy's headlining, that was Jimmy headlining that performance. And then the next year, in the spring, April 26, 1969, Jimmy's back in Los Angeles, headlining the Los Angeles Forum, a very large venue, and then concluding with this concert again for today, the April 25th, 1970 performance at the LA Forum. And I want to jump right into this. This is it was an audience recording, so a fan was able to go in with his or her microphone and tape the gig, and then later it became it became a bootleg, and sort of a famous one, and we'll touch upon that later. So getting right into the show. I mean, I love 1970. I feel like it's kind of an underrated year for Jimi Hendrix, but it's a really great year, both in the studio and live. I feel like Hendrix was getting better and improving as a guitar player. I mean, there were new sounds and new techniques and new influences that were coming in, and still, I mean, even still, we hear a lot of new music in 1970. Jimmy was still working on a studio album. His last studio album, besides Smash Hits, which was a compilation, his last studio output was Electric Ladyland. So it had been a while. In the spring of 1970, it had been a year and a half since his last studio album. But let's keep in mind that the Band of Gypsys had been released on the 25th of March in 1970. So 1 month prior to this LA Forum show, the Band of Gypsys record hit the market, and Hendrix fans loved that. I mean, I love it even today. It still, stands as a great record that we talked about last time. So even though it wasn't a studio album, it definitely satiated Hendrix fans, and continues right to this day. So jumping right into the show. The recording opens with a fade in, and so this is a 2-disc. This is a 4-sided bootleg. So obviously we're talking about side 1. And then Jimmy, I love talking about Jimmy's banter, because then we can we can kind of feel what kind of mood he was in, right? We can kind of figure out if he's in a good mood or a bad mood, and he's in a very playful, happy mood at the Forum tonight, so it's kind of fun. So he says, "I ain't seen some of you since last time. We'll start off with some oldies and moldies dedicated to the girl over there in the 14th row with yellow underwear." And then, he's strumming his guitar. And then you can hear a female fan. She's, near the taper. And, that's what I love about some of these audience recordings. You can hear fans, near the taper, near the microphone. And, it just sort of adds another layer of excitement, if you will. So this female fan, she says, "Look at him," like you can tell, Hendrix's stage presence, it was really electric, I'm sure. And then Jimmy introduces the band. We have Billy Cox on bass, Mitch Mitchell on drums, the crowd, starts to cheer, and then Jimmy says, "And yours truly on video, thank you." And I read earlier that there was at this show, a video projector. So the Forum is a big arena. In some angles, Jimmy, the band, they're just these little guys on stage. So, and I've heard about that in other 1970 gigs where they did have a video screen set up. Hopefully some of this stuff will resurface. I know there was a fan who had some, I think from Dallas, Texas, 1970, but I'm not sure what happened with that. It's still sort of unknown, if you will. Jimmy's doing some tuning, adjusting his guitar, and then they go right into Spanish Castle Magic. And so this Spanish Castle Magic is the show opener. And it's sort of the last time we talked about the LA Forum in April 26, 1969, Jimmy played an absolutely amazing version of Spanish Castle Magic, one of my favorite versions, one of my favorite pieces of Hendrix music. So it's cool that he opens it up here with this one. And I guess he came on late, and there was a pretty strong police presence in front of the stage. And one of the lyrics, again, Jimmy, we talk about this all the time, right? He's a great improviser, but he also improvises lyrically. Whatever's going on around him, he sort of, fuses it into the show. So at one point he says, "Watch out for the pigs and travel by my dragonfly." So he's kind of, just taunting the audience, taunting the police presence there, if you will. Okay, we mentioned this is an audience recording, so I just wanted to touch base on terms of the sound stage, if you will, right? Even though it's an audience recording. So Jimmy's guitar is very much out in front, right? Mitch is pretty faint here. I mean, most bootlegs, Mitch is just below Jimmy, and either in a lot of experienced bootlegs, you barely hear Noel a lot of times. But generally you can hear Mitch pretty well. Unfortunately here, though, he's not as audible. Billy's slightly louder than Mitch, which is cool. I mean, here Billy's Jimmy's new bass player, even though he had been playing with him almost a whole year, going back to April 1969. So it's kind of interesting. They're still together through some different changes, but Billy already making his mark, right? Jimmy drops into his first guitar solo and really aggressive leads to start, and again just going after that bombastic version that we heard from Jimmy the year prior. Jimmy's playing some really aggressive leads. He goes up into higher registers and he's playing with some nice sustain. He goes pretty quickly back into the Spanish Castle Magic riff, the opening, and he goes back into the chorus. Jimmy leads in, and you can kind of tell he's kind of looking to end it. And then there's more strumming like the opening to close. So it was kind of, a shorter version, not, just a couple guitar solo, some pretty searing lines, but nothing like we heard previously. But that's okay, right? Every show is different. So that was a great show opener. Jimmy says, "Yeah, okay, thank you." He's tuning again. And then he says he's dedicating the next one. This is dedicated to the little over there in the A-man section, a thing called Foxy Lady. And then you hear this loud feedback, the opening to Foxy Lady. Jimmy digs in early. He's got some really nice bends, and he's really playing some nice stuff even before he hits the first verse. His strat sounds really chunky, and it's really got a nice tone overall. And we've seen pics from this LA Forum show, and he's playing his black Stratocaster with the maple neck, and I think he called that one Black Beauty, if I'm not mistaken. I know there are a lot of guitar players who have their own sort of Black Beauty, but it was for Jimmy in 70 especially, even going back to 69, it was either the Black Beauty or the white Strat with the maple necks, but he was mostly playing maple necks at this point. Only when he took out his SG, or I'm sorry, at this point in 70, he was playing his Gibson Flying V for some of the blues numbers, but mostly it was Strats with maple necks. So getting back to Foxy Lady, Jimmy's got some really charged vocals. He drops into his solo, really tasty lines, real nice bends, always with Jimmy, and some really nice high touches. I was hearing some notes that I hadn't heard from him before, especially in this version. And it's like, and that's what I mean when we talk about Jimmy was getting better as a guitar player. He really was. I mean, he was still, yeah, at this point, this song is 3 years old, and he's played it 100 times, and he's still able to mine new ideas, with that basic structure in his lead. So that's really cool. And then he's winding the song up, and he says, "Here I come, baby, coming to do it to you." And then you can hear Jimmy using the mic stand as a slide to end it, and it's kind of a raucous ending. The crowd really loves it, and then they go back into more tuning. And it's interesting. Jimmy opened the second song again, just like the L.A. Forum '69. That was the second song opener, "Foxy Lady." Jimmy goes back into talking to the audience. Yeah, okay, then we happen on the other sax o'clock, and sometimes it's hard to hear what he's saying, on the vinyl, and I'm picking up the needle and taking it back over and over, and sometimes it's hard. The volume fluctuates, so it's if he's speaking really low, it's more difficult. But so then he says, "We'll see if we can lay this one on you. Oh, while y'all been running around messing with the woman, you'll be in a whole lot of trouble when the soldiers come back from the war, because a lot of you will be found laying in somebody else's bed. And so we call that a cat getting up, getting his running shoes together." Something like this here. And then they go into Lover Man. It's like, I just wanted to put, like the way he introduces the song, it's like a little story, and then they go right into it. I love that. So they go into Lover Man, and obviously this was formerly known as Rock Me Baby, Rock Me All Night Long, the blistering Monterey version. But it had been Lover Man for a while, at least going back to '68. So he's, he comes right out, and I noticed he used some interesting octaves right before he dropped into the lyrics. Again, Mitch is really silent in this on this recording. And Billy, again, he's slightly above Mitch. Jimmy's vocals, with his guitar right on top. Really nice solo to open here on Lover Man. Great mixed lines. Again, he's just playing a lot of different sounds, if you will. He goes into the Flight of the Bumblebee, which is really common for Lover Man. Again, Jimmy's got some really charged vocals. He's really into this performance for the outro verses, and again, he's got more mixed playing. He's just really charged. He plays some really nice killer outro lines with tremolo. He's just the guitar is howling. I mean, I was just so blown away by this version of Lover Man. I gave it an A+. I mean, it's just kind of short, but very sweet, and the crowd loved it. It was pretty amazing, really. And then Jimmy says, "We'd like to do a song about a cat that feeling kind of down a little bit from all this," because he explained that he's feeling kind of down because this dumb chick put him down, and he's tuning after every sentence, and his parents don't want him around. So he's thinking about leaving town and go on the road. He knows where to be by himself. And again, some of that was hard to translate, that ending part. And it's called "Getting My Heart Back Together Again." It goes something like this here, and then you hear Jimmy play a few blues riffs, and then he says he's waiting for the train, and then he plays a few more sort of in a more of a Delta style, which really defines this tune. And then he says, "That train, that ultimate trip," and then they, he does some really tasty Delta signals, if you will. Before they drop right into "Hear My Train A-Comin'." So he calls it "Getting My Heart Back Together Again." But we, for whatever reason, the title is "Hear My Train A-Comin'," and that's how I've always known this song. But it's got a great opening, and Jimmy's got some really great effects on his guitar at the show. Stuff that we heard on the Band of Gypsies stuff. You can tell he's got his Univibe on, and some of these effects go back to Woodstock. There's some nice call and response here with Jimmy singing and playing really nice, and he's mixing up the lyrics subtly. you know he's in a good mood. He says, yeah, 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 like he's really into it. And I noticed, like there was sort of a band of Gypsy's influence here, I thought, like just the way that the tune sort of unfolded, right? And that December 31st, 1969, the early show version, just one of the best versions. So I'd like to think that there had been some influence here. Again, some more killer call and response, and as Jimi sets up his main solo, and he drops in wonderfully. There's just a great tone on his Stratocaster. Mitch is again pretty subtle but wonderful, and Jimi continues with his strident guitar soloing. It's almost like a sheets of sound, Jimi, right? There's some nice pullback with his tremolo and more searing lines. Some again nice touches. It's like he's been hitting some new stuff all night. There's just more crying and screaming from his guitar, and at one point, and you hear this even going back to 1969. Jimmy's mimicking a train blasting its horn with his tremolo, which is pretty cool. Billy's a little more noticeable now. Jimmy's kind of getting it all from his Marshalls, and then he kind of takes it down a little bit, almost like a cool down. There's like these coil-esque lines by Jimi. He's still again really mixing it up, and he does a trill and then gets into more really eclectic blues lines. And again, we hear more vocals from him. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I got to leave this town. He goes back to the first position all the way down with a really nice bend with tremolo, and he's setting himself up nicely for the outro solo with again more great call and response. There's some big chords to close, and the Hendrix scholar Chris Dixon, he called these the Gloria chords. No doubt a reference from the 1968 TDG Gloria studio version. But you hear those chords. I think that's kind of a cool reference. The tune gets even quieter, right? And then Jimi says, "You made my heart feel bad." Like he's just laying it all out for the audience. And I've heard stories. Jimi had girlfriend problems with Devin and whoever, but it's just he's so honest, right? He's just laying it all out. So just a powerful version, great version to start the tour with. Okay, flipping over to side 2 on this record, on this bootleg, we hear Jimi. Yeah, okay then. There's another thing that we've been messing around with. We recorded a Capitol LP by the name Band of Gypsies, which all of you remember anyway. It's poor like a recording, but people want to make it other things, and we did this one thing called Message to Love. Well, everybody's rapping about love, he. Yeah, everybody's rapping about love, so yeah, we want, and I couldn't really see what it sounds like, and then they go into Message to Love. And I like this one. It's again, Billy and Mitch were in that original Woodstock band, and that Message to Love opened their Woodstock set. So here it is. Here's Billy and Mitch back together on stage, 8 months later with Message to Love. Jimi giving the tune its Band of Gypsy props, and there's some nice octave work. Again, followed by some really searing lines by Jimi. We hear some nice rolls by Mitch, and it kind of reminded me of Buddy. I think Mitch may have listened to this and incorporated some of Buddy's drumming in this song. That's what it sounded like to me. And I've heard, just to give you an idea of how big Mitch's ears are in terms of his ability to listen to other musicians. Even when he, in their version of Sunshine of Your Love, he's hitting some of Ginger's stuff there, pretty nice. So kudos to Mitch. We hear that nice build up, the crescendo, and Billy's bass is really thumping at this point. It's nice to hear it. Jimi ends the song with some interesting cordial styles, like Another Work in Progress, and I listened to it a couple times. I couldn't quite pin it down. It definitely sounds like something he would develop in the summer of 1970. So if you're out there and you know what that is at the end of Message of Love, please put in the comment. I'd like to know. It's pretty cool. Jimi says, yeah, okay, and then he does another Delta blues sort of bend, and then he says, yeah, well, somebody told me to ask somebody to go back to their seats. I don't know what's happening over there, but as long as we keep a groovy show and keep everybody antacid, and we can have something together, keep everybody feeling all right, say yes, oh, don't mind. And again, I couldn't discern some of that. Somebody told me that, and then he plays some more blues riffs. And then he says, no offense to Peter Fonda and the Psychomaniacs, but dig, we'd like to do a thing called Easy Rider. It was fun to watch the film. I think it was out of sight. It said a lot of things, but we want to continue from there, you know? Who wants to get blown up? We have this thing called Easy Rider in the key of E flat 1, and then you can hear Mitch, you can hear Mitch's drums. Again, Mitch is the lowest, but it's cool to finally hear him, right? As he kicks off Easy Rider. And then Jimmy's guitar comes back in again. Just it's dominating the soundstage of this audience recording. Jimmy's got some really nice vocals on this one. Some kind of great guitar playing in between the verses by Jimmy. Just more searing lines. You know, I love this Easy Rider riff. It's very cool. You know, the chorus is stone crazy, and you know, from the Band of Gypsies, it was kind of fun hearing Buddy sing that part, if you will. There was a cut though. I noticed there was a cut here, and maybe the taper ran out of batteries or something. But something happened. But it comes back into Jimmy's guitar solo. There's some nice bends into the outro chords. I mean, Jimmy's been playing his ass off this whole show. And then there's a nice build up to the outro changes. And then you can hear Jimmy play some of the intro into Hey Baby. And then he says, yeah, okay, thank you. I'd like to do another thing. I don't want to bring anybody down or anything like that. And then he's tuning. The truth, even a showman can't bring you down, no kind of way, just because he's something to work with. It's a thing called Machine Gun. Don't you ever forget it. Crowd responds. You know, they're cheering. Again, everyone's probably heard the Band of Gypsies version, at least some of them. And they go right into Machine Gun. The LA audience, you know, they're like I said, some of them are familiar with this version. You know, Mitch has sort of a military rudiment style. You know, it's a little different than Buddy, but still pretty cool. Jimmy with all, you know, his Univibe on, and there's some really nice soloing early on by Jimmy, almost a watery tone at times. Some really nice sustain, and you know, again, it's interesting to think that Mitch probably listened to the Band of Gypsies album just to kind of shore up some of the music. Obviously, Mitch is putting his own sauce into it, but you know, just to check it out. I mean, I think it's obvious. You know, you can hear it in his drumming, right? So, and I say that because, you know, there's some classic Buddy rolls here that Mitch does. There's some nice lines by Jimmy in between the verses. You know, I love the delta signals on this one because for me, this is always going to be a delta blues song, right? It's Machine Gun, but it is a blues. It's just a powerful blues song. There's these bombastic cries. One in particular that by Jimmy that opens his solo, and he's just, you know, he's really flying high. He's really, you know, he's literally up in the ionosphere. Really nice high touches, some new notes, some different sounds, and that's kind of been the theme of this forum show, right? Like Jimmy is still, you know, he's playing new music, right? Is even as a soloist, he's hitting new notes, and so you, as a listener, you're like, it's captivating, right? So you know, Billy and Mitch, they're holding it down really nicely underneath, and at this point, you know, Jimmy sounds almost Eastern. There's some Eastern sounding lines and more low feedback moans over the, you know, and then you hear the line, over yonder is your mother, and more passionate vocals and guitar playing. You know, Jimmy's just giving it all back into the main Machine Gun riff, you know, with just tremendous power and feeling. Jimmy goes back up into the higher registers, if you will. Again, followed by more sheets of sound, just these rapid notes. There's more bends and cries and screams. And I mean, some of the bends I heard, I could tell they were probably 2, if not 3 steps, you know, like in terms of the bend, like the steps, they just crazy. I mean, his ability to bend the strings, I'm sure you guys have seen pictures up close where the strings are just, I mean, that's how he was able to get a lot of these sounds, right? I mean, he physically, you know, manipulated the strings and the guitar. Like he just, he punished the guitar, really. Literally, he's like strangling his guitar, right? The Stratocaster is tortured. It's almost like, you know, the guitar is taking shots, right? In this machine gun analogy. You know, Jimmy takes it down, and you know, it's interesting. I could hear him. He teased a few notes of the Star Spangled Banner, right? And he's still teasing it and mixing in his own machine gun stuff. And then you can hear him exclaim, "Yeah," before taking his outro solo, again with heavy bends and really nice tremolo manipulations. And he creates these sort of haunting lines, and we hear it in versions of Machine Gun throughout 1970. You know, this sort of haunting outro style where he's bending strings and using the tremolo, and it's pretty cool. Some of it's really beautiful stuff. Again, it's haunting but beautiful. And then, you know, the song ends suddenly, and Jimmy's addressing the crowd, and then the record fades out. So just a really cool version of Machine Gun. I mean, a lot of new stuff going on there. Back with side 3. So the side 3 begins with a fade in. There's crowd noise, and Jimmy's guitar is noticeably out of tune. No surprise after that version of Machine Gun where he was, you know, strangling it basically. Then Jimmy steps up to the mic. I'd like to do a thing called a song, Room Full of Mirrors, that some of you out there undoubtedly have been through one time or another, one kind of way or another. And maybe after you'll get all of the, like, I know what I mean, after you come and everything, you might want to get out from under there so that you can see something else and see the world too. Like they say, on a clear day, you can see forever and all that other bullshit. Yeah, here we go. So it's kind of, you know, I think basically he was trying to describe, you know, again, like before Loverman, you know, he's sort of describing, it's almost autobiographical. I mean, the song is autobiographical for him, but like, you know, he's just trying to convey an idea, what the song means to the audience. It was hard, really. Again, the levels fluctuate, so it was hard to really get all of it. So that was probably the toughest one. So he goes into the room full of mirrors, and you know, it's like we continue to hear a lot of new music, right? Like this is a new band. This isn't the Jimi Hendrix Experience with Noel. This is the post Band of Gypsies, the post Woodstock, post Band of Gypsies version of the Jimi Hendrix Experience, where Jimmy retains Mitch and has Billy Cox on bass. So it's a brand new band with a lot of new music, right? I mean, it sounds like an amazing gig. The last time we heard Room Full of Mirrors was back in Toronto on May 3rd of 1969, where Jimmy got busted going into Canada. But he did play Room Full of Mirrors that night, so that was cool. And had played it before in the Royal Albert Hall, the February 24th. There was a jam at the end of that show, and they played Room Full of Mirrors. And you know, this one, I mean, Jimmy, I think Hendrix fans know this is a song that he kind of struggled with. You know, I mean, conceptually a great song, but he, for whatever reason, he had a hard time pinning down what he wanted musically from the song. And go back to the August 12th, 1968 version with Paul Caruso on harmonica. I think that's on the Jimi Hendrix Purple box set, but from 2000. I mean, that one's got that version of Room Full of Mirrors. It's like a slow Delta blues, right? I mean, that may have been on purpose to sort of accommodate the harmonica, if you will. But I love that version. I love Jimmy's Delta style, and so that's a great version. And you know, to go from that version to like some of the versions we hear in '69, they're just you know, apples and oranges. So we hear it here at the Forum. There's a slight disconnect before Jimmy takes his first solo. You know, the music sort of sounded a little uncertain just for a few measures there. But Jimmy comes out of his solo, guns blazing. You know, he says yeah like 6 times, and there's some spoken word, and he, you know, he goes into a trill and back into the verses. Some nice scatting, and he's still kind of working along. So again, even this version, you can kind of feel like it's just sort of, I mean, there is a structure, and you know, it has lyrics, but you know, instrumentally it was, you know, sort of, you know, not as tight or not as lean as some of the other stuff. So they go right, and then from there they segue right into the introduction of Hey Baby, right? It's the the high E sort of intro, and it's got a real Spanish sound. Again, another new tune. We hear some very pretty. This is really new guitar stuff. We definitely heard hints of it in '69, but this is like, Hey Baby fully realized. Very pretty. Some very pretty playing by Jimi. And again, he just could do it all. He had a real beautiful style. He could play very beautifully. He does here on this one, and he segues into the A minor chord progression, A minor, G, F, and as he before he's doing the intro, and before he segues into the A minor progression, if you will, there's like this. He creates this sort of cascading, fluttering sound of notes, if you will. It's very cool. And then he, again, his commentary is so great. It's so classic here. This is classic Jimi. You can tell he's in a great mood. He's just got such a good sense of humor. He's playing Hey Baby, and then he says, "I'd like to do something that's soft and just jam a slow tune for a second, like an intermission, for instance. They say hot dogs are on sale, so just go and buy them, your popcorn and so forth. Sit down and eat." And then he goes right back into it. He paints a beautiful picture at the Forum. The music, it is sort of things have kind of mellowed out for this song. Mitch and Billy have noticeably improved in their respected audio levels. Again, it's a slower pace with Jimi, noodling before he drops into the verses. There's some really nice guitar work here by Jimi. The lyrics, "May I come along?" I think one reviewer thought, maybe from the LA Times, that was the name of the song. But obviously new. I mean, this is new music at the time. There's some subtle octave runs by Jimi, and he takes his first solo really heavy on octaves. It kind of reminded me of the Woodstock Mastermind, where, Jimmy's just almost using straight octaves for the whole of Mastermind. So that's what he's doing here, and I love that style. I love that his octave style, if you will. And he's also mixing it up with some A minor, A natural minor. I mean, there's some notes in there that to me sounded like natural minor. And then he segues into the next song, which is Villanova Junction. This one's played at a much faster tempo than the closing Woodstock version. In a lot of media, the Villanova Junction was just labeled as outro solo, but it's called Villanova Junction. And again, it's a tune out of A, so it works nicely with Hey Baby. Jimmy's still really octave friendly here, and he's really feeling it. He backs off a little bit, and then Mitch kind of rises up, and you can hear Jimi comping lightly on his string, and lo and behold, we get a drum solo from Mitch out of Villanova Junction here. Mitch had 2 drum solos at the last Forum show in '69 and Tax Free and Voodoo Child. So here he is getting a drum solo in a brand new song, Villanova Junction. Mitch is going at it hard. It's kind of got a different feel than his '69 forays, but it's still excellent. I love hearing Mitch do these solos. There's a nice snare series where he's just hammering down on his snare. The crowd loves it. And he just keeps going, right? It's an extended solo. The crowd starts whistling, and then you hear Jimi kind of signaling he wants to return on his guitar, right? Like he's hitting some strings and hitting some guitars, and then he kind of, Jimi, the great improviser that he was, he's like playing along with Mitch, and then they go right into Freedom, right? So I was like kind of blown away by that. Like I wasn't expecting that. Here's another new song, right? More new music. And these guys are just so tight. Billy, Mitch, and Jimi here. They recorded an early version of Freedom back in February of 1970 at the record plant. Again, that's on that Jimi Hendrix Purple box. But this, that was a real early version. I love these more realized versions here. Jimmy's really chunky, and it's interesting, the title Freedom, it's definitely one of the more catchier expressions of the era. There's some really nice bass work by Billy, and you can imagine probably Billy and Jimi working on this in the hotels or at Jimmy's apartment or whatever. But they're just so tight, right? Jimi has got a playful solo in between the verses. And then he in the bridge, and he takes a proper solo, real biting tone on the strat, just howling lines. There's a funky sort of cordial breakdown, if you will. And then Jimmy's slightly out of tune. I mean, he was bending the strings hard on his solo. They go back into the main riff, and he goes back into the main riff, and then Billy and Mitch rejoin. There's some more outro vocals by Jimmy, and this is a great new tune and really sets the tone for this set and for the tour. Really, it's just like, okay, yeah, I was not expecting that. That was sort of a curveball for me. And then so we're on to side 4. We're on the last side. The recording fades right into the Star Spangled Banner. This was a pretty cool version. I mean, to me, I listen to these versions. This one, again, just like this whole show, it's like you hear these different notes. There's wild note placement here by Jimmy. He's so fluid. He's got great control of his feedback and tremolo. I mean, he's just sounds amazing. And, the build up to the Rockets' Red Glare line, where Jimmy he's mimicking sounds of war and and actual missiles and explosions and, machine gun, like he was able to get all that just from his guitar and through feedback and stuff. It's just amazing. He goes back into more pretty stuff. He's playing with, and so this part I liked. He almost has that machine gun outro style that we talked about earlier, where he's bending the strings and using the tremolo. It's like that, but with more sort of like with a Hey Baby style lines. Anyway, it's really beautiful. And then they go right into Purple Haze. They have to restart it a second time, but the crowd's loving it. The crowd's clapping. Everyone's just pumped, including the band. And again, Jimmy, the lyrical improviser that he says, "Whatever it is, that pig put a spell on me." He drops into his solo, and it's a really smoking hot solo. Nice bends and sustain. There's some single note cries and screams by Jimmy. I mean, the guitar is so out of tune. You can tell Jimmy's just punishing it. And again, he hits some more hot runs. There's some really nice lines. They're powerful when he comes back into the riff, the Purple Haze riff. And then you can tell he's doing the outro solo with his teeth. And then he says, yeah, right. So obviously the crowd's really pumped up. I mean, a lot of people probably went just to hear that song. Jimmy says, thank you very much. Thank you very much for showing up, man. This ain't the first time. This sure ain't the last time. That's for sure. Because of all the static, it might think that they they say this, they say that, think blah, blah, woof, woof. And I thought that was cool to finally hear him say blah, blah, woof, woof. You can hear Jimmy kind of click on his wah-wah pedal. And then Jimmy goes right into his 1969 kind of stage rap, where he would open shows in 69 with this little rap where he says, this is our own little world right here tonight. So forget about yesterday or tomorrow. This is for tonight. Like, thank you very much for coming, and we hope you... And then he trails off, and then he says, and he's kind of laughing, no, we don't leave here, but we hope you have a good time. We'd like to do America's new theme song, and they call it for the Black Panthers and the Pink Tigers and the Short Silent Oaks and, a thing called Voodoo Child, and the crowd loves it. And then Jimmy says, thank you and peace. And don't forget to stand, man. It's your turn to stand. So he's encouraging everyone to stand up. He's still tuning. His guitar is just tortured at this point. He may have tweaked out the tremolo unit. I don't know. But he's at this point, he's really struggling with it and keeping it in tune. Again, he throws some more 69 lines out where he says, Cowboys are the only ones that stay in tune anyway. Again, his guitar is out of tune. Jimmy's still tuning. His guitar is so badly out of tune. It's just, he's been punishing it all night, right? He says, oh, well, the thought was good. The intention was good. Jimmy, you can hear him kind of teasing Voodoo Child as he's tuning. He's finally he opens up. He finally goes into the opening riff into Voodoo Child, and it's just ferocious, right? Right out of the gate, right on the heels of that Purple Haze, just like in '69 at the LA Forum. It's just a verbatim outro with Purple Haze, Star Spangled Banner, Purple Haze, and Voodoo Child. So Jimmy's just charged. He's got these growling voodoo riffs, if you will. Finally gets into the first verse, right? Billy's laying it down. I mean, it's pretty charged. There's some nice changes in between the verses. Jimmy's really hot for his first solo, not expected, again, he's hitting these atypical notes that are just new, right? He's building lines, and he's got some real nice howling feedback, long cries and sustain. He's just howling, especially in that first position when he does that bend. It's just so powerful, and you can hear his equipment. It's just like breaking down. There's more tuning troubles, and Jimmy takes it. So he can, he kind of brings it down a little bit. He quiets the song down, but even still, even though he takes it down, they're still all raging, right? They're just raging, and he puts a little more emphasis in that line. If I don't see you no more in this world. I noticed that, followed by more screaming, howling lines by Jimmy, just searing runs. He's choosing to change it up, and his guitar is just spent, and then he segues right into another new song, which is "Keep on Grooving," and there's a couple lines that stick out: "Keep on grooving, keep on loving, babe." And I've seen this on the Jimmy Plays Berkeley video. So if you've seen that version of Voodoo Child, it's the same song. Jimmy sings, "Stop Smoking." More single note bombastic bends by Jimmy. And this is really peak Jimi Hendrix, I think. He's just slaying his guitar here, slaying the Strat. He switches his wah back on for the outro. And the guitar, again, it's just growling, and there's more feedback, and amps are howling, and then the recording sort of fades out. So, we didn't get the super extended version like we did in '69 with "Sunshine of Your Love," but who cares, right? This is 1970. It was still a great version, and overall an amazing show, right? I mean, I thought this show held up very well for an audience recording. There was a lot of good energy. Some really amazing playing by Jimmy in particular, and Mitch, definitely we were able to hear him in his drum solo. Billy holds it down pretty well. There's a reason why Jimmy reached out to Billy. I mean, Billy was a great, and still is a great bass player. He proved himself quickly. He was on the Band of Gypsies album, and here he is on this tour with Jimmy and Mitch. So just a great show. And just to sort of recap some of the highlights for me, just sort of the atypical playing that we hear with Jimmy. A lot of the newer songs, I tried to break it down in terms of like older experience songs and newer stuff. So he starts off with sort of 5 older songs, and then in the middle part of the show, so we hear a lot of new stuff, and then he ends it with the 3 old war horses, Star Spangled Banner, Purple Haze, and Voodoo Child. I love that version of Star Spangled Banner. There was just some new playing again. That idea of Jimmy, hitting new notes, and just his playing is so different and exciting. It's like a different Jimmy, a more evolved Jimmy. And that's what we continue to hear, like Jimmy just continues to get better at the guitar. I can't emphasize that enough. And that's why I love Hendrix so much. It's like, you hear these stages of his playing that he just continues to get better and better. And obviously you wonder, what would he have done in 71 and 72 and, all throughout the 70s. I mean, I think he would have continued obviously to get better. So it's nice to hear him reaching some nice peaks here. And I couldn't help myself but go back to that Woodstock set because, again, it's that Woodstock set. That's when Billy and Mitch first played together on stage. They had some studio time, but on stage they were in Woodstock, and here they are, eight months and a week later. They're on stage at the LA Forum, Billy and Mitch with Jimmy opening up this new tour, right? The Cry of Love tour. Just incredible. So I wanted to touch base on some of the media. And I got a couple references here. And this is from The Ultimate Hendrix, written by John McDermott, Eddie Kramer, and Billy Cox. And this book essentially is, this is Sessions Part 2. It's like Sessions, but like a better version, if you will. I think they had maybe left some stuff out, but they talk about this LA Forum show, and the last paragraph, McDermott says, Hendrix's Forum performance took on special significance after his death, when an amateur audience recording was the source for a double album bootleg pressed months after the concert. That's the bootleg we just heard. There have been countless bootlegs issued in the 3 decades since Hendrix's death, but perhaps none with the consistent appeal of this Los Angeles Forum recording. And here's another picture of Jimi at the LA Forum. And again, this one is from sessions where he's looking down at his guitar. So some great media there. And just another book I wanted to share with you guys about this show. And this one is esteemed Hendrix researcher Ben Velkoff and Luigi Garudi, their Jimi Hendrix book, 1970 Day by Day. I definitely recommend these. I've got a couple books by Velkoff, and they're all amazing. I recommend them. You can get them online. They're just greatly researched. But I wanted to share these 2 quotes from Mitch Mitchell and Billy Cox. So this is what they had to say about these LA Forum gigs. I'm going to read Mitch first. Mitch says, the Forum gig was not very memorable. We went in, did the gig, and left, and it shouldn't have been that way. A lot of the gigs were like that. I have to say that most of the gigs were unmemorable. The same old places yet again. So, maybe Mitch, he's getting kind of road weary. He's like, look, we're playing the Forum again. Billy Cox held things down very nicely, never any problem at all, a really stable person. But it was really starting to lose its rock and roll flavor, even though on some gigs we did deliver the goods. If it had been something completely different, like the Miles Davis thing, that would have been great, but this was like the old band, but much less exciting. So, for whatever reason, Mitch is just, he feels like this new band is less exciting than the experience. And then, so here's what Billy says. Billy says, Mitch was cool. There were no problems at all. He didn't even talk about the Band of Gypsies. He just went about his business and never mentioned it. There was a real respect between Mitch and Jimi. We just got down to playing, which is what it's all about. The older songs were new to me. They were old to Jimi and Mitch, but I brought my flavor on the bass, and they enjoyed that. I think that's true. I noticed that too, even in the Band of Gypsies shows. Billy, especially in Fire, for example, we talked about that last time. I personally like Billy's bass playing. I mean, I would like Jimi. I would choose Billy over Noel as well. I mean, I kind of get where Mitch is coming from. That LA Forum show in '69 when Noel was on bass. He was probably not having as much fun. He sounds kind of drob on stage that night, but the experience were magical. They were a magical band. And I think that's probably what Mitch is talking about. Like maybe that magic had diminished a little bit, but I don't think it did. We could talk about this stuff all day. I just wanted to share, in closing, some pictures that I had. I got this bootleg, and it's just, that's all it is. There's no pictures. Still pretty cool. So, I wanted to share a couple pictures that I have from my Jimi Hendrix Sessions book, and these have been, you can find these in that book, but this is a picture of Jimi playing at the LA Forum. That's his outfit that he had on that night. And interestingly, the experience played the next night in Sacramento. This was a Saturday night gig. The next night they were in Sacramento on a Sunday night. Jimmy's wearing the same clothes in Sacramento as he had on at this gig. So obviously he probably stayed up all night, didn't change his clothes or whatnot. And they played a pretty amazing show in Sacramento. We're not going to get into it now, but they play an amazing version of Spanish Castle Magic with some really beautiful stuff. We'll just leave it at that. And then I wanted to share this picture of Billy Cox. I don't think I can't confirm if this is from the Forum or not. It doesn't really say in the book. This just says how he appears on stage in 1970. So instead of Noel Redding, we have Billy Cox and, excuse me, just one of my favorite favorite versions of the Jimi Hendrix Experience with Mitch and Billy. So that wraps up our Jimmy Plays Los Angeles series. I hope you enjoyed the series, again, going back to the Hollywood Bowl 67, 68 shows and the more recent 69 and 70 LA Forum shows. Please like and subscribe, and feel free to mention anything we talked about in tonight's anything about tonight's show in the comments. And thank you so much for tuning in, and look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Talk to you later.